Good morning, afternoon or evening, everybody. Welcome back to the sixth and final part of the Hunting Jagdpanther series. Last time we got the foundations for the base built. This time out, we are going to add paint, grass, and get this thing finished. Without further ado, let's get it done. Before we get on to the fun stuff, we have a little bit of cleaning up to do. In the last episode, we laminated and trimmed the base. Now we just need to fill the gap left over. To do this, I used my trusty giant tub of all-purpose filler just to fill in all the gaps around the edge with a palette knife. Adding small amounts at a time and using the laminate edge to scrape towards you, then finally blending the excess into the already cured filler. If you get any on the laminate itself, this can be easily removed with your finger or a rag of some kind. I repeat this process around all the edges, giving a seamless effect onto the laminate. Once the filler has cured, I mask off the laminate for the next stages. This will stop any paint or any effects staining our hard work. With the whole thing filled and masked, I lay down a base coat of black primer. This one-shot primer by Mig Ammo can be sprayed straight from the bottle using a 0.5 nozzle. I give the whole thing a solid coat. This will help with the adhesion of the paint and allow us to create shadows and tones in the groundwork. Once the whole thing is coated, I move on to the dirt. For this, I'm using XF52 Flat Earth by Tamiya. This is mixed 50-50 with acrylic thinner. I start painting all the ground around the wall, being careful not to get too much on the wall itself. I continue until all earthy areas are covered, then go over any areas I would like to be more brown, such as the areas around the track marks and where there won't be as much grass. Next, it's time for the wall. I make a mix of XF82 Ocean Grey with some XF52 Flat Earth, and as always mixed 50-50 with acrylic thinner. This color is mainly for the grouting finish, so I wanted a lightish grey with some earthy tone to it, no exact science, just mixed by eye. With the base layers done, it's time to paint some stones. I mix up a range of different stone colors using Vallejo paints diluted with tap water and paint each stone individually using a fine brush. Yes, this method does take a while, but the variation in color between each stone really does enhance the overall effect and add reality to the project. I carefully paint in every stone, rotating the colors round and trying to be as random as possible. After painting stones for what can only be described as a small age, it's time to lay some grass. I don't have a static applicator, so I'm applying the grass by hand. The first stage is to coat the area in PVA glue. Once covered, I carefully start making little bunches of grass and applying with tweezers. I'm using a bag of 4mm scenic grass and trying to apply in big clumps so the grass stands on end. After a layer has been completed, I add some more PVA glue, this time watered down so it can be added with a dropper bottle. I then add more grass into the bare areas. When I said the last process took an age, this one takes it to another level. To speed up the process, I added some mossy areas using Woodland scenics fine turf. Whilst it does take a long old time, I proved to myself it can be done by hand without an applicator, of which can be very expensive. After a while, I got rather bored of planting grass, so decided to make some stones to go around the broken wall. I decided to use some old Milliput epoxy putty for this task that had started to go slightly hard. Managed to cut off a soft part of each piece and mixed it until completely merged together. I then rolled it out into a cone sausage and started cutting off random size pieces with a palette knife. Then it's just a case of rolling the little pieces and making them into stone shapes. I found they were sticking a fair bit and leaving fingerprints, so I coated them in talc powder. This made them far easier to shape. Once I had a good amount of stones shaped, I left them to cure for a couple of days. In the meantime, I finished off the grass and added a tree. I didn't record that process simply because it was my first one and thought it was bound to be awful, but actually turned out pretty well. Next stage is painting the grass. I wasn't happy with the tones of the static grass, so I painted it in layers, starting with a dark green. I carefully painted the grass using as little air pressure as possible. Otherwise, the grass just goes everywhere. I'm also doing very light layers, doing my best to keep the soil layer underneath brown. I carefully coat the whole grass in this dark, shadowy green, being extra careful around the tree and walls. Next, I mixed up a grass green using flat blue and yellow. I'm pretty sure there are some grassy green colors out there, but I don't have any, hence the mixing. Again, I carefully paint light layers over the top of the dark green. The dark layer underneath I wanted to work like a false shadow, so again used as low pressure as possible. At this point, it's looking better, but still a bit dark and monotone for my liking. So I added some white to the green mixture to lighten it further, then carefully painted the grass again, but this time just highlighting areas. To add further variation, I added some more white and some buff to the mix, and again painted patches and areas to highlight them further. I was pretty happy with the grass at this point, but decided to add some dark yellow to the mix to give the appearance of wilting grass. Again, painting a very light layer in certain patches. With the yellow layer done, that's where I decide to call the grass done and move on to some weathering on the wall section. I'm only doing some light weathering to the wall, just to get some rain streaks on there really. To do this, I'm using some white oil paint, applied directly onto the wall in dots using a fine brush. Then, it's just a case of streaking the dots with white spirit. I have covered oil streaking in more depth in episode 4, just in case you missed it and want to check it out. The white on the wall helps to give a chalky, washed-out look to the wall and give a little bit of variation to what was looking a little bit flat. Next up, it's time to paint more stones. Using a similar palette to when I painted the wall, I paint all the loose stones individually in exactly the same way. I did find some old bits of plaster to paint and snapped a few of the stones in half using some pliers to give some sharp edges. I then leave the stones to dry before I apply them to the base. Whilst they dry, I start to add some vegetation using these AK Interactive Summer Green plants. These are super easy to apply and you get a lot of bang for your buck with these little plants. I simply apply them to the model using the watered-down PVA glue to hold them in place. This process is just moving them around, trying different places, and seeing what looks right. Once the stones have dried, I start placing them on the model. Again, using a trial and error method, I just keep adding or taking away the stones until I am vaguely happy with the look. Once happy, I glue in place again, using the PVA glue. I don't have a massive amount of footage of this stage, as it was my first pop at it. I was kind of learning myself along the way. It is, though, just a case of moving stuff around, adding stuff, removing stuff, until ultimately you are happy with it. And that's it. The hunting Jagdpanther build is complete. I am aware I moved through the motions quickly with the diorama section, but there will be more of these videos coming soon, of which I will go into further detail on various techniques. It's been a long road, this one, but whilst not the finest work in the world, I am fairly happy with the outcome. If you have enjoyed the videos or found them vaguely helpful, please do hit those like and subscribe buttons and let me know your thoughts in the comments. There's a kit review for this model coming soon, then we will be looking at something slightly different on the next project. Thanks again for watching, and happy modeling, everybody.